What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. We are talking photography today. I'm sure everybody wants to click some beautiful photographs, and to do that, you should be strong at basics. We see is some people they play very fast with those settings. What made them so fast? Practice. I'm doing this as a series, maybe 3 to 4 parts. We'll go step by step, and at the end of every video, you'll learn some basic to important things. Let's move in. Two things come into our mind when we start talking about photography: a smartphone and a professional camera. I know what you're going to ask. I'm going to blow this off your mind right now. Why can't a smartphone, this tiny thing, can't give an output like this? Nowadays, smartphone cameras are having more megapixels than these cameras do. But why can't they give an output like these cameras? Here's the long and short answer. There are many reasons to this, but the main difference is the sensor size. Yes, it matters. The biggest difference between a smartphone camera and a professional camera is the sensor size. Sensor is the thing which captures light and convert them into electronic signals. The professional camera sensor is 5 to 7 times larger than the smartphone camera sensor. With bigger sensor, the more light you can capture and the photos look better and punchy. Next reason is the image processor. The camera's image processor is a powerhouse. Its whole life is dedicated to do only one thing: to give us images. Although smartphones have a processor, it does various things. Its main function is not to give us images. And the next reason is megapixels. More megapixels means more quality, but the thing here is not the megapixel count. It's about the pixel size. Even less megapixels on a larger sensor can give us better output because they are larger in size and they can capture more light with less noise. I'll give an example for this. The famous 1DX series from Canon, it's just 20 megapixels. 20 fucking megapixels. But the images it produces are professional level. The new Sony a7S III, it's just 12 megapixels. Everybody trashed Sony for opting a 12 megapixel sensor. Some of them even said, my mobile phone has more megapixels than the Sony a7S III. But the reason they opt a 12 megapixel sensor is to have better low light performance. Arguably, it's one of the best video shooting cameras out there in the market. So it's not megapixels, don't fall into the trap, it's about the sensor size. We are done. I hope I have cleared this thing. And if you are serious about learning photography, consider getting a professional camera. Or if you can't get one, no problem. Smartphones nowadays are brilliant. The smartphone companies started introducing pro modes into the cameras. Play with all those settings, learn them, practice them, and then you can upgrade. Now coming to the actual part, the so-called settings. We can see different modes on the camera dial. I'll leave them all right now. We are not going to discuss them all now. We are only talking about auto and manual modes. The whole point of this video is to come out of auto mode. That's what a smartphone camera does. You open the camera application, you point at your subject, you click the picture, done. It's done. You see your picture on your screen. But if you want to learn, swipe that to pro mode or switch to manual mode and play with all those settings. You see different things in the settings section, leave them all to the defaults. We are talking only about the exposure triangle, the ISO, the shutter speed and the aperture. These are considered as the 3 pillars of photography. Master these 3 things and you're done. You can click any kind of picture you want. These are the basic but most important things. What is this exposure triangle? This is very simple. All these 3 things, the ISO, the shutter speed and the aperture, control the light entering into the camera. They are like security checks. You can allow or restrict light entering into the camera. What is ISO? It is the image sensor's sensitivity to the light. In simple language, you can darken or brighten the images. If we increase the number, the images will become bright. Higher ISO will help you to shoot when it's dark, but there is a problem here. With high ISO, you will be introducing a lot of noise into the image. Your images will look grainy at higher ISOs. So it is recommended to keep the ISO value as low as possible. Remember this, and we will talk about shutter speed now. What is shutter speed? When you click the shutter button, the shutter opens and closes, you'll hear the sound and you'll see the picture. Shutter speed is responsible for 2 things: changing the brightness of your image and freezing action or blurring motion. Shutter speed is measured in the fractions of a second. For example, if you are opening your shutter for 1 second, you are letting a lot of light into your camera. If you are increasing the shutter speed to 1/5, 1/20th, 100th, 1/500th, 1000th of the second, the shutter opens and closes very fast and the amount of light entering into the camera decreases. Also, at slower shutter speeds, there's a lot of motion blur in your images. For example, if you are shooting a fast moving car and you are at a slower shutter speed, the image will look like this. Because you haven't freezed the image. To freeze the image, you need to be at higher shutter speeds. For fast moving subjects, you need to be at faster shutter speeds, and for study subjects, you can use slower shutter speeds. I'll give you a basic idea of what shutter speeds you have to use while shooting. 100 to 1400 if you're shooting portraits, 1400 to 1800 if you're shooting pets or slow moving subjects, 1000 and above for fast moving subjects, for example sports. These are not fixed values, you can experiment with your settings. Now we are going to talk about aperture. Aperture is the opening of your lens through which light passes. Again, aperture also does two things. It controls the amount of light entering into the camera and also the depth of field. The lower the value, the more amount of light will enter into the camera, and higher the value, the less amount of light will enter the camera. At lower aperture, you will get a lot of blur in your background, your subject will be popped out, and at higher value, everything will be in focus. See this chart of aperture. At 1.4, the lens is wide open and the house in the background is completely blurred. If you slowly increase the aperture value, everything will come into focus, but the image gets darker. To compensate that, you have to decrease your shutter speed or increase your ISO. So for portraits, you can use low aperture value because you want your subject to be popped out, and you can use higher aperture values when you are shooting landscapes or group photos because you want everything in focus. Now you know what these things do. We'll see some examples. For example, see this image. I'm shooting on a 85mm f1.4 and I want the aperture to be as low as possible, that is f1.4. ISO at 200 because it's in the evening, and shutter speed at 1/250th of a second. Now see this image of a moving car. I know it's not the perfect image, but it's the perfect image for us. The moving car was blurred because of the slow shutter speed. This was shot at IS 400, shutter speed 1/300 and aperture f8. In order to get this image properly, you need to bump the shutter speed to 1000 or more, and because of that, you'll be darkening your image. So you have to increase your ISO to 300 or 400. Also, you can decrease the aperture. Now let's see this picture. It was taken from the internet. You can see a lot of grain on the image. It's the noise. It was a very bad lighting condition, probably very dark in the evening. So the ISO was bumped to 12,800 to get the brightness into the image, and the aperture f1.4 and the shutter speed as low as possible because it's very dark. So we discussed all those settings with certain examples. I hope you are clear with the basics. Listening is not the way. Go and practice. You will master them. So this is the end to this video, and in the next video we'll discuss some advanced topics like white balance and how does it affect your images. Also the composition, very important. Until then, practice the exposure triangle, the ISO, the shutter speed and the aperture. Master them. You click an image and you see that image and you should be able to tell what you need to change. So we are done with the video. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, practice, practice, practice. Bye. Practice. What's up everybody, welcome back to the channel. What next? I forgot. Let me tell you this example for ISO. See this black grape and see this white one. Leave it. It doesn't make sense. See this? A knife. Sweet. Grapes.